Hello and welcome to the first Shogun podcast. Now, if this is your first time listening, a very warm welcome. And if you've been following the story so far, thank you for accompanying me on this journey as we explore the rise of Minamoto Yoritomo, who was the first shogun of Japan. Now, in the last episode, we brought to an end quite a big chapter of our story, and that was the rise and fall of the Genji general Kiso Yoshinaka, who was Yoritomo's cousin. And so from this point, the story shifts focus as we lead up to the final clash between the Genji and the Heike, the great sea battle at Dan no Ura, which we had a preview of in the very first episode of Season 1 with the tale of the unfortunate bard Hoichi the Earless. So at this point in the story, before we get to those final battles, I thought it might be worth just pausing to recap where we are now and who the main characters are, as there are a few people who will play a really important role in these closing stages. So one person who won't be featuring in the final episodes of the story is Kiso Yoshinaka, the master of the Eastern Mountains, who rose to glory with his great victory over the Heike at Kurikawa Pass, which we looked at in episode 4, but who, once he reached the capital, basically threw it all away when he lost control of his men, started losing battles against the Heike, and then decided to burn down the retired emperor's mansion. So at the end of the last episode, we saw how he ended up being shot in the head with an arrow while he was stuck in a muddy rice field, so it wasn't a very glorious end. His friend and Lieutenant Kanahira ended his life by throwing himself off his horse with a sword in his mouth, then landing on the ground and instantly skewering himself through his head. So he certainly had a more spectacular finish. And the last we saw of Tomoe Gozen, Japan's most celebrated female samurai, was as she rode away after the battle, and nobody really knows what happened to her after that. So they're all gone. So who's left? Well, there are really 4 main characters or sets of characters that we'll keep track of in these final stages. So the first, over in the east of Japan in Kamakura, near modern-day Tokyo, is Yoritomo, the leader of the Genji or Minamoto clan, and it's Yoritomo's story that we've been following ever since the first episode of this podcast series. But at this point, he actually doesn't play a central role in the war because he remains in Kamakura, directing events at a distance while the battles are going on in the west. Unlike his father, Yoritomo wasn't really a great military leader, but he was very strategic and very good at getting other people to fight his battles for him. In fact, the last time he took part in a battle was at the siege of Kanasa Castle, which we covered 6 episodes ago. So while he's giving orders from Kamakura, the future first shogun is also building up his power base in a feudal system called the Samurai Dokoro, by which he was able to govern his retainers, all the powerful families who owed him allegiance. So although we can refer to his side in the war as the Genji, which means the Minamoto clan or house of the Minamoto, not all the warriors who followed him were actually members of the Minamoto family. In fact, very few were his relatives. But because they all followed the Minamoto clan head as their leader, collectively we can refer to them as the Genji. So ultimately, Yoritomo's goal is to wipe out the Genji's main rival, and that is the Heike, or the House of the Taira. And these 2 great samurai clans have been at each other's throats now for 4 years. But Yoritomo also has a more immediate family issue to resolve, and that's because of an issue with his daughter. Now, as part of an agreement he reached with his cousin, Kiso Yoshinaka, Yoritomo and his wife, Masako, agreed to take care of Kiso's son as a guest in Kamakura, but basically as a hostage. And in fact, this son of Kiso is engaged to be married to Yoritomo's daughter, or Hime. But now that Yoritomo has just killed Kiso, how is Kiso's son going to react? And can Yoritomo really continue to have this future son-in-law living in the same household? So trouble is clearly brewing between Yoritomo and his wife and his daughter, and we'll see how that plays out in the coming episodes. And trouble is also brewing, although they don't realize it yet, between Yoritomo and his half-brother, the 25-year-old Yoshitsune. Now, Yoshitsune is 12 years younger than his brother Yoritomo, and in the last episode we saw how the two brothers shared a last moment together before Yoritomo sent his brother off to the capital. Now, I think I probably overdid that scene with the horses, but I was really just interested to imagine what that final moment between them must have been like, because it really was the last time that these two brothers, who are two colossal figures in Japanese history, would ever see each other. Okay, so while Yoritomo is still in Kamakura, over to the west, his brother Yoshitsune has just arrived in the capital, Heiankyo, modern-day Kyoto, having just defeated Kiso Yoshinaka at Uji Bridge and then in the muddy fields of Awazu. And from this point on, it's Yoshitsune who becomes the leading figure in our story. Now, Yoshitsune was a real person, but there have been so many legends that have grown up around him that it's hard to know what's true and what isn't. In some ways, he comes across as a kind of Japanese Robin Hood, a very charismatic leader who's a great swordsman and has a loyal band of supporters. And chief among these is the famous warrior monk Benkei, who is like a cross between Little John and Friar Tuck, a great hulking warrior who will pause to say a prayer before he cuts down half a dozen horsemen. We haven't seen much of Benkei since he first met Yoshitsune many years ago on a bridge and challenged him to a duel, but he now reappears in the tale of the Heike, and in the last part of the war he plays an important role. Another member of Yoshitsune's band of merry men is rather less loyal and also not very merry, and that's his rather sour lieutenant Kajiwara Kagetoki. Now, Kajiwara has a lingering resentment against Yoshitsune, not least because his son just lost the great horse race across the river at Uji Bridge. And as we'll see, that jealousy is going to get worse and worse as events unfold. Okay, so we have Yoritomo in the east, staying largely out of the way for now. We have his brother, Yoshitsune, in charge of an army that's now stationed in the capital. So what about the other side in this civil war, the Heike? Well, ever since the army was torn apart by Kiso at Kurikawa Pass, the Heike have been trying to build up their strength again. After fleeing the capital, they've been up and down the coast of Japan looking for a safe harbour, and they finally found one at Yashima, which is on the coast of Shikoku, near modern-day Takamatsu. Now, the Heike's great warlord and figurehead, Lord Taira no Kiyomori, is no longer alive, so the Heike are experiencing a kind of family succession squabble between the various sons of Kiyomori. Technically, their leader is Kiyomori's eldest surviving son, Munemori, but he doesn't have that much respect from the rest of his family. A more formidable family member is his brother, Tomomori, and it's Tomomori who has been leading the Heike in a series of naval battles in recent months that has started to turn the tables against the Genji. But it's not just the sons of Kiyomori who'll play a key role in these closing stages, because their sister, the lady Kenrei Monin, is the mother of the young emperor, a 5-year-old boy named Antoku. And this is crucial because it means that even though they've had to flee the capital, the Heike still have control over the reigning emperor. And, perhaps even more importantly, they also have possession of the 3 sacred treasures, and that is the sacred sword, the imperial jewel, and the heavenly mirror. And these are items that are believed to have been passed down from the gods through the imperial line from the dawn of time. And in fact, they are still used today when a new emperor is enthroned, most recently in 2019 when Emperor Naruhito acceded to the throne. These days, no one is ever allowed to see these objects. They're always shrouded from view and their locations are kept a secret. And at least one of the items, the sword, is believed to be a copy and not the original. And the reason for that, as we'll find out, is what happened in the final battle of the Genpei War at Dan no Ura. Okay, so we have Yoritomo directing the Genji from the east in Kamakura. We have the Heike rebuilding their strength in the west on the island of Shikoku. And in the middle is Yoshitsune and his army in the capital. Now there's one other key character who's also in the capital that's going to play an important role, and that's the retired emperor Go Shirakawa. And although his title is retired emperor, he's still very much in control of imperial affairs. At this point in the story, Go Shirakawa is in his late 50s, and he's survived a lot over the last few decades. rebellions, wars, imprisonment, assassination attempts. And he survived all of this really because he's very smart, he's very strategic, and he's completely ruthless. So in that sense, it's easy to see him perhaps as a kind of medieval Rupert Murdoch type figure, the power behind the scenes who isn't afraid to switch his support depending on which way the wind is blowing, and always seems to pick the winning side. Just in the last few months, Go Shirakawa has in turn switched sides from the Heike, then to Kiso Yoshinaka, and now to Yoritomo's Genji. Yoritomo, in turn, needs to have Go Shirakawa's support in order to justify waging war against the Heike. So what does Go Shirakawa want in return for his support? Well, now that Kiso's been removed, more than anything, he wants his 3 treasures back, because without those, he can't enthrone his replacement emperor, another infant, one of his grandsons, that he's chosen to replace the boy that the Heike have taken. So it's a delicate balance. Yoritomo needs the retired emperor's support, and Go Shirakawa needs Yoritomo's help to retrieve the 3 imperial treasures. And that is why Yoritomo's brother, Yoshitsune, has received a summons to attend an audience with the retired emperor, as we'll see in the next episode. So that's where we are. And in the final few episodes, we'll see how Yoshitsune launches a trilogy of great battles against the Heike, on the beach at Ichinotani, on the island of Yashima, and finally in the great sea battle at Dan no Ura. So I hope you'll join me as we see how the Genji take on the Heike in the closing act of the Genpei War, and how Minamoto no Yoritomo finally achieves his dream of becoming the nation's first shogun.